Good afternoon, everyone. I am your host, Tiffany Daniels, also known as the Lady Autist, and this is another episode of Spilling Tea. So we are going over conservatorship again today for a couple of reasons, which I will get to once we get to the end of all the information we're going to go through. First off, we're going to go into basically what it takes, what the requirements are for someone to take conservatorship, aka guardianship, over you. We're going to go over a specific type of guardianship conservatorship. This is going to be on the disability, mental illness side of things, because they do differ from, like, for example, when someone has Alzheimer's. And again, we're going to get to why it's relevant here in a moment, and also exactly the nightmare it is to actually get out of these things. So, we've already gone over what it actually is. So, let me go ahead and skip through a few things here. Forgot I had a mouse for a second. Okay. So, I just had my eyeball on it. Let me go back up here. Alright. So, in order for someone to get guardianship or conservatorship over you, if you are 18 or older, you have to be basically one of the following. What they call mentally disordered, including individuals who are psychotic, suicidal, demented, incapacitated, or in some other way unable to make legal, medical, or financial decisions on behalf of themselves. I want you to keep this in mind when we get to the end of this. Like, highlight it in your head. A conservatorship may refer to legal responsibilities over a person who is mentally disordered, including individuals who are psychotic, suicidal, demented, incapacitated, or in some other way unable to make legal, medical, or financial decisions on behalf of themselves. So, a person who seeks guardianship over you has to go to court and file the proper paperwork, and it is on them to then prove. And let me read through this here. You have to have that person deemed gravely disabled by the court, and that you have to be able to prove, if you're filing for guardianship or conservatorship, that they are unable to meet their basic needs of food, clothing, and shelter. Terminologies do vary and things do change from state to state, but basically this is put in place for people who are proven to be significantly disabled by mental illness, and disabled people with all kinds of myriad of developmental disabilities, as well as the elderly with things such as dementia, what have you. Now, in typical conservator proceedings, an allegedly mentally incapacitated person must be evaluated by a qualified physician or psychiatrist who prepares a report documenting the person's mental capacity that is provided to the court and may be used as evidence. Okay, so you got all of that, right? So, if you got locked into one of these things, if you get locked into a conservatorship, what you are going to need to do is be able to prove that the things that got you into the original guardianship in the first place are no longer valid. You have to prove to the state that you are no longer incapacitated and are able to make the decisions necessary for food, shelter, and other financial decisions. Now, the question is, why am I going over guardianship / conservatorship again when we've already gone through it in at least 3 other videos? Well, I'm going to tell you. And it might give us a new perspective on the JD versus AH case if the rumor I heard online that she was thinking of filing for a conservatorship over him proves valid. If you think about it and you go all the way early back, we're talking about around 2013, and you notice that she's doing a whole lot of documenting, a whole lot of pushing him to go to his doctor, and a whole lot of this trying to convince him, especially in that email, that he mentally is not all there. Some folks would say that was a form of abuse, but what if there's something a little bit more behind it? If she could convince him that he was mentally incapacitated enough that he needed someone to watch over him in such a manner like a conservatorship. You see where I'm going here? She would have to get his cooperation to a certain point. And him, as he usually is not going to agree to go to a doctor and be analyzed to see if he needs a conservatorship. But if she could beat him down enough, if she could convince him that he needed somebody to look after his better interests, because she convinced him that he is not mentally capacitated to handle that themselves, well, that's a different ball game. That would have given her complete control over his finances, as well as, depending on what's written in the conservatorship, possibly even more control over his life, including the people he would be able to see and have come visit him. So, I'm not saying this was what she was going after, but the fact that it has been brought up by a person that I saw on Twitter, it had me thinking about the way she was documenting things in the beginning very differently. Because what photos does she got, folks? She has photos of him completely incapacitated, passed out with ice cream on his stomach. You look at these photos, and if you think of it from this angle, photos like this could have been used had she at least the smallest amount of cooperation from him as evidence in a case to take to court, so that she could have gotten a conservatorship, a guardianship over him. And folks, that would have given her the kind of control that she wanted. Control over finances, control over his day-to-day life, control over who he was able to see, who was able to go in and out of his home. That kind of control would also mean it is less likely that anybody else would know what was going on behind closed doors. This is a nightmare scenario here. And I am really glad that this didn't happen, because it is extremely difficult to get out of a guardianship / conservatorship, especially if the person who's being your conservator is fighting against you. So, I'm very happy this didn't happen in that case. I also did this in regards to the whole Britney Spears thing, of course. What her dad had to do was prove all of that. He basically had to prove to the court, through doctors, that she was completely incapable of making her own decisions. Completely. Now that she is in it, she has to be able to prove that she is able to do all these things that initially put her into the guardianship in the first place. Be able to handle day-to-day life, right? This is extremely difficult to do because the conservator has to let you have some responsibility so that you can prove to the court you can handle it. If your conservator is telling you, no, I will not let you have those responsibilities, you're kind of in a messed up situation. It makes it that much harder to fight. This is why so many people with disabilities are so deeply against guardianship and conservatorship. There is too much room for abuse and too little room for the conservatoree to be able to fight back. So it's flashing a light. There's got to be some changes made when it comes to this. There's got to be tighter restrictions on who gets into a conservatorship, in my opinion. It shouldn't just simply be up to the opinion of the judge. Why? I hate to say it, but ableists are everywhere, including on the bench. I'm sorry, but it's true. And I don't want a judge determining what my mental capacity is. Sorry. I just don't. But it can be fought, and it can be won. You just have to prove that on all the points for which the original guardianship was filed, that is no longer valid. And this has to be ratified by doctors and professionals. It can be a long, drawn-out freaking train wreck, but it can be done. Now, that covers the Spears part of it. It's just, I wanted to get into this today because it puts a different connotation on some of the evidence that AH has taken in regards to JD. We've all wondered out loud how these pictures were to serve her in any way of proving that he was violent against her. But if those pictures were taken for a different reason entirely, if they were taken because she was wanting to pursue something like this instead, then all of a sudden some of that so-called evidence and why she did things that way start to make a little bit more sense. Because why take pictures of him incapacitated like that all the time? Why try to make him look unable to be able to do basic functions through day-to-day life if she's trying to paint him as a violent abuser? But if she was trying to paint him as something else first, that makes a little bit more sense. Now, this is all just speculation on my part. I have no concrete evidence that her goal was to get a conservatorship or guardianship over Depp at all. But it makes sense though. And it's just something that I thought that maybe that might have been part of the game too. Now that's assuming that she even knows what conservatorship or guardianship is or had any of the information that I just gave to you. She may not have. But I felt the need to go over it. This is kind of a what if scenario. Alright folks. That is all I got for you this afternoon. Now, As always, folks, we don't get a whole lot of views on this channel. The few that we do tend to get removed by YouTube, so if you would please just hit that button, hit subscribe, and don't forget to hit the comments. I'd appreciate it. Also, I appreciate your time today, and I do hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.